Hello everyone, ForeignWrestling.com. This is Bill Apter. April 28th, 2005 was an absolute miserable day. It was on that day that we lost young Chris Candido. It's been 10 years since his death, and that kid was like a nephew to me. In the past few years, his brother Johnny Candido and I have stayed in touch on social media and on the phone. And recently, he and I got together at Chickie's and Pete's down in South Philly, the Packer Avenue location, just to hang out and tell some Chris Candido stories and just talk about his brother and missing him, and also about a documentary that's being worked on about Chris Candido. So here is that interview. Again, it's kind of all over the place. We just kept talking about him and telling stories. But April 28th, 2015, 10 years since Chris Candido died. I can't believe it. Hard to fathom. Let's sit down at Apter's Alley here at Chickie's and Pete's, South Philly, of course, Packer Avenue, which I know you used to come here quite a bit.
I grew up here, yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. By the way, this is Bill Apter, as you know, at Apter's Alley Annex, and you know what? Just because of our
It just
elbows,
don't want to stay up for me.
yeah,
and you.
Apter's Alley just doesn't want to stay up there, so you all know
So this is
all about Apter's Alley. So we're here at Chickie's and Pete's in South Philly, the Packer Avenue location, of course. And the gentleman sitting to my left has done a lot in the pro wrestling business, but you may know him even better because of his brother. Your brother was a guy named, he was like a nephew
What was
to
his
me.
name again?
Chris Candido.
Yeah, that's him.
A very special day
Yeah.
for all of us. Chris, tell us why.
Well, it's going to be 10 years since he passed away.
Yeah.
And it seems like it was yesterday.
Doesn't
And
it?
yeah, it does.
Yeah.
It really does.
Yeah.
I mean, and I just want to do everything I can as a younger brother to make sure that the wrestling world remembers him the way that he loved wrestling, because that's all he cared about. You know, that's all he cared about.
You know, he would call me sometimes 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, and he'd say, "Willie, I got an idea. What do you think of this?" He thought
that's all
about the business day and night.
Oh, and he did it until the day he died.
Yeah, I
that's
know.
all he cared about.
I know.
Me and him would meet every day. We'd have
Come on,
breakfast.
move a little closer. Willie.
Yeah.
Yeah, you two would meet every day.
Well, because we lived like literally, what, a mile and a half away from each other. So
For wrestlers, that's walking distance,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
So we'd have breakfast, lunch, dinner, and 3/4 of the time I'd sleep at his house. Maybe sometimes he'd stay at my parents' house. This is when I was younger.
Yeah.
And that's all we did was talk wrestling, do wrestling, and then I started wrestling, and I would follow him, and then
He was a hero to you, wasn't he?
oh my gosh,
What's the age
what was he
difference?
ever? 10 years.
10 years between the two.
So when he was Skip, I was like 11 or something like that.
Yeah.
You know, let me just say.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, in the backyard, he was Doug Summers, and I was. I'm sorry. Yeah, he was Doug Summers, and I was Big John Studd.
Really?
And he would put me over every day in the backyard. You want to hear a funny story, real quick?
But that's why we're here at Apter's Alley. It
Okay.
doesn't have to
Okay.
be real
All
quick.
right. Here's a very funny story. I'm sure you know the wrestler, the Great Muta, right?
Who doesn't?
Okay.
Yes.
Well, I don't know. Some people.
You
but-
all know the Great Muta.
The Great
Keiji
Muta.
Muta.
So
Or Muto, whatever they call it.
So Chris is 10 years older than me, so I was like 4, 5, 6. He was like 14, 15, 16. Used to take the food coloring from my mother's pantry, put it in his mouth, and he'd hide around the house. I'd be walking by and he'd coat me in the food coloring, right? And I'd go, and I'd run into the shower and wash it all off. and he'd do it over and over again. And then the day of my sister's baptism, right? So I'm dressed up in a nice suit and everything. I go, I'm gonna go up, and because let me just preface this by saying,
I know what's coming.
my brother lived on the 5th floor of our very big house, and that 5th floor was like Mecca to me as a little kid, you know? So I always had to run up and show him everything, and you know. So I run up to the 5th floor of the house, I open the door. The second I open it, I get covered
the green mist.
as I'm wearing the suit. And he goes, oh my God, Mom and Dad are gonna kill me. And he grabs me under his arm and he runs, you know, out into the garage and he scrubs all the green mist off me. And then we go to the communion. So a couple days after that, I'm saying, I gotta get this guy back. Even in my little kid brain, I know I gotta get him back.
So what'd you do? What was the revenge?
The revenge was, I climbed up, I took the food coloring, I put it all in my mouth, right? Like he used to say, I'd say, how do you do that? Because he used to walk around the house and go, and like shoot it up in the air. I said, how do you do that?
He kayfabed you, didn't he?
Yeah. But what I did was I dumped the whole thing in my mouth, and I ran up into his room, I kicked the door open. He was under the covers with this girl named Donna, right? So I remember the two of their heads popping out from under the covers and looking up, like he did this little smile. I ran up and I spit, not like the Great Muda, but most of it got on her, a little bit got on him, and I bolted. And he caught me on the porch. He just started, you know, ragging me around like an older brother.
That's unreal.
Threw me on the ground.
That's unreal.
And then ever since that day, I mean, even the next day, he wasn't mad. He thought it was hilarious.
What I want to tell people who are probably saying, you know, is this supposed to be like a tribute to Chris Candido? That's not what we're doing here. We said we're going to get together and tell some stories about Chris Candido, just from him, because he lived with him.
Yeah, my entire life. I mean, because people don't understand. You know, to people, Chris Candido was this like great worker. He was my older brother and a goofball, and you knew that too.
He was. Mean, you know, people knew he was a goofball, but when it became time to get in the ring and work,
was serious.
He was the consummate professional. He really was. He really was.
And you know, I mean, as far as wrestling goes, he hated talking over a match. Hated it.
Yeah.
Like hated it.
Yeah.
To the point where he'd have a finish, and then just
I'm just trying to move you closer to the microphone.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
He hated talking over a match. All he'd want was a finish, and then he'd be like, because you know I wrestled him many times, and my first couple of matches were against him, so I can imagine what he did to the other guys. So he'd say, how do you know what people want to, you know, how do you know how the crowd's going to react? We plan everything out. You have to listen to the crowd.
Yeah.
You know,
He had that kind of mentality.
Yeah. Like, so
go ahead.
No. So he would take me out there and run me ragged. Well, I think, you know, for him and me, it was, you know, for a different purpose. But I saw him and Al Snow go 2 hours multiple times. Well, 2 times. But I saw him and
Al is the perfect guy to do that with.
Oh, man. He loved just going and you know, not having to call, not having to talk about anything earlier, and
you just get in there and do it.
Well, the main thing I want to get across about my brother was he was just so dedicated. Like since day one, all he ever cared about was being a wrestler. Like I remember like me talking to him, and you know, I would say, bro, when did you want to be a wrestler? Because I wanted to be a wrestler when I saw him as an older guy.
Sure.
He said, you know, he's like, when I saw our grandfather,
Chuck Richards.
Yeah, Popeye Chuck Richards.
I remember him because back in 1970 when I started my career, I went to your grandfather's house and took pictures of him.
So my brother was born in 72. So maybe at like around 74 or something, he's like, I just remember seeing all these dudes, and they were big dudes. He's like, I didn't know what they did. I just wanted to be one of those dudes. He's like, I didn't care what it took. I just wanted to be one of those dudes. So he hung around Chuck Richards. That's all he wanted to be, was one of those dudes. He learned what it was. And then my parents took him on vacation to Puerto Rico around like when he was like 6 years old.
Yeah.
And there was a meeting of wrestlers at the hotel.
Yes.
And
it was the National Wrestling Alliance meeting.
And he made my parents take him to the meeting as a little kid.
Wow.
You know, like that's all he ever cared about.
So one of the things I want to talk to you about is you mentioned that he was in a magazine long before he was in the pro wrestling magazines, right?
Yes. Yeah. He was in Who's Who of American High School Students.
Really?
Yeah. He was a standout wrestler.
Yeah.
Straight A student all through high school. Powerlifter. He was on his powerlifting team. He was benching close to 500 in high school. Then then over 500 before he went to Smoky Mountain. That's how he always gauges himself. Standout wrestler, straight A's, everything by the book. Like Chris was really just everything by the book, and just such a nice guy. Like,
he was fantastic.
Oh yeah, I mean,
again, he was like a nephew to me. So.
The guys who know him know like how he really was. But honestly, all through high school, he was just the perfect guy. And our house was always the house that him and all his buddies hung out at. Like so it was great for us growing up. Like there was just
you met a lot of the talent that would come to the house.
Absolutely.
Sure.
I mean, I remember meeting Sabu when I was, I don't know how, 8 or 9.
Wow. And he speak English to you?
Yeah, but
he did.
I remember he had like gig marks all over himself, and I said, "What happened to you?" He goes, "I fell." And then I told my brother, I said, "What happened to that guy?" He told me he fell, and he started laughing. And then there would just be all the guys, because like I said, my brother had this room up on the 5th floor. It was actually 2 rooms. It was the main room and the office, and for me it was like Mecca. Like I thought it was the greatest thing ever. Like, and he was always the nicest guy, so he would never yell at me or anything. So whenever I was like scared as a kid, I wouldn't go to my parents' room. I'd go up to his room.
Yeah, as long as you didn't have green mist, you were fine.
Yeah, we'd hang out, we'd watch wrestling. It was the best, So
I need to talk to you about. I'd be remiss. One of the high points of his career, of course, is when he teamed with Tammy, with Sonny, and the
of course.
What a great, incredible peak in the WWE, WWF.
Yeah, absolutely.
Tell us how you viewed that whole time of his career.
They met when they were 17 years old at a show at Matawan. That's where she grew up. Yeah. It was a show at her high school. She was a high school senior. He was a high school senior.
Yeah.
Right. So that's when they met. And that night, the two of them like hung out, and he spent the night over her house. And his car broke down and overheated, and my mom had to go pick him up on the Parkway. So that's when my mom knew she was like in the picture. He's
special.
Because she was like, "Christopher, where are you?"
Yeah.
And he was at this girl's house, so my mom gave him, the whole deal. And so then they started getting serious, and then Tammy started babysitting me and my little sisters.
Wow. Sonny was your babysitter?
Yeah, as a little kid, she was my babysitter.
How many kids wanted that?
She was honestly, she was a great babysitter, because she's 10 years older than us too. But yeah, she was a really great babysitter. She was cool.
So they met, and the relationship took off.
Yeah, it took off.
And what was your reaction to that whole explosion
in the beginning?
Their career? Yeah.
Oh, I thought it was amazing. I thought it was great. I loved Tammy. In the beginning, I thought she was like great. I mean, obviously, as a little guy, I was like, this girl's taking my brother away from me. I guess subconsciously, I didn't really think that. I loved her. I used to hug her and love her, and she'd babysit us. Yeah. I mean, it was great. There was no really I thought it was great. I mean,
yeah, but once they struck it like really big.
Once they struck it really big?
Yeah.
Like when they were all in WWE, that was a crazy time, because then I was in high school. They bought this mansion. Let me just tell you about this mansion. Were you ever over there?
I actually was once, yes.
Okay, so they had like 6 bedrooms. They had my bedroom, 4 other empty bedrooms, and they had a jungle room.
Yes.
Yeah.
The jungle room.
The jungle room was just full of exotic animals.
Yeah.
Like lizards, snakes, boa constrictors, birds, all this different stuff. They had an ocelot, which was like an ocelot type cat.
They were Michael Jackson's collectibles before Michael Jackson was doing this.
You have no idea about that house. Because I was on the road with ECW a lot, as Meanie can attest to. But when I wasn't there...
Meanie is sitting there, by the way.
Yeah, Meanie's sitting right next to us.
All right.
When I wasn't there, I wasn't like of age. I was like 14, 15, 16.
So this was Disneyland to you.
My brother would give me the keys to all his cars. He had like a Corvette, SUV, all these different cars. He said, "Bro, watch my house." He'd give me like $3,000 cash, and he'd say, "Watch my house." So I would walk his dogs, hang out at his house, order food, And then I just got into high school. So I had these enormous parties because he never wanted to move very far from our family. So it was like 10 miles from my high school. So I had these huge parties at his house. And then like right before he came home, I'd make sure all the girls
Like
would
nobody
make sure his
was
house
there.
would clean up, you know.
Yeah, like a party didn't happen.
It was the most amazing time.
So you had an amazing time at that time.
An amazing time.
So only because in the interest of time
Yeah,
here,
that's
and you know,
whatever you want.
we're running 10 miles a second here, and we'll do another segment eventually.
Yeah, we
here.
should, because there's so much to a story.
What I want to talk about is you had hinted to me that in the works is a documentary
Oh yeah.
about Chris Candido, about your brother.
Yeah, it's a documentary about the very quick rise, and then the fall, and then because there was a time there from maybe like 01 to 03, like where he was, you know, not doing well. I mean, not necessarily because of him, just not doing well, you know.
In his personal life.
In his personal life. And then I'll tell you what happened. So, but me and him never lost touch, obviously. We were together every day.
Of course.
Like we'd get into fights over it. Like the two of us would like be at each other's throats. And then one day,
That's what brothers are for.
so one day the two of us are sitting just like me and you were sitting, actually at this exact level. And he's cutting a promo.
Look at me and tell me what he said.
Okay, I'll tell you
I'm
exactly
Chris.
what he said.
What did he say?
All right, well, I'll tell you. I'll tell you. Okay,
Yeah, what did he say?
all right. I'm Chris. He goes.
You're Chris, or
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, I'll tell you what he said. He goes, all these different guys on the indies, you know, they're all skinny. They don't have any bodies. They look like crap. He goes, you know what? When I was 18, I was already in Japan. I had this great body. I had already been to WWE. I had already done all this stuff. And I go, that's why you were a standout, numbnuts. And I hit him in the head, right? And he goes, man, I really messed everything up, didn't I? I go, no, dude. I'm like, you can get it back. You're 30 years old. I'm like, stop it.
Yeah.
You know? And he goes, you know what? You're right. He's like, well, look, you don't. He's like, let's do this.
So tell us about the documentary.
All right, the documentary. These guys contacted me. Ron from Turnbuckle Magazine. They're great guys.
Yeah, they are.
The reason they decided to do this was because they heard all these different wrestlers. They had just gotten kind of into the business, and they said every wrestler had great things to say about Chris Candido.
They all mentioned Chris Candido.
Every
didn't
single
they? Yeah.
wrestler mentioned Chris Candido.
Yeah.
So I joined Twitter like not very long ago, and they're like, Johnny, you know. So we linked up, and they drove from, you know, not drove. I'm sorry. They flew out from Arizona to New Jersey. I got them a place, you know, their whole staff,
Yeah.
and they filmed my family.
So you hooked him up with everybody.
I hooked them up with everybody.
Yeah.
My family, all my brother's friends, Sandman, Shane, you know, all his boys, the
You're
young
still
boys.
going to get me, right?
Well, that's off camera. I'm going to ask you about, you know how you're going to end up in the whole deal.
Yeah, no, I know that.
because
I know that.
what it's going to be is a free download on iTunes. The first way through your iPad. It's going to be a free download on iTunes.
Well, this is very exciting. So what I want to ask you about now is to wrap up, because I know you're going to be tweeting about this regularly once this happens.
Now that I started tweeting,
Well,
yeah.
no, tell everybody out there where they can follow you on Twitter,
yeah.
so they can find out more about the documentary.
You can find me at Gimmicks18.
GIMMICKS,
Yep.
number 18.
That's because I gave myself that name because I say gimmick as a substitute for every other word, and people make fun of me for it. So at Gimmicks18 or Johnny Candido, Candido.
All right.
And so you can find me there, and the documentary is going to be amazing because they interviewed our entire family.
I can't
and
wait.
it's so like it's so true. Everything is just,
I can't wait.
you know, everything is unbelievably
Last
true.
question, okay?
Yeah, go ahead.
If Chris were watching this right now,
Oh man,
if he were watching this right now,
he'd come down and give both of us a big hug.
I know that, but what would you like to say to him right now?
He knows what I'd say to him. I love you, bro. I miss you so much. You not being here kills me. It really kills me, you know? That's all I can say. He was my best friend ever. Like,
We all miss him. But you know, he
but
would
it's so hard, like, not
he
having
would
him
love
here.
knowing how everybody appreciated him so much. That's why I can't wait for the documentary.
I know he would.